This happened on Halloween 4 years ago. I was sitting on the sofa in my apartment, relaxing with my laptop, waiting for kids to come knock on my door as I usually did. I was too old for trick-or-treating, but not a fan of parties. However, this year I had just moved to a new apartment, which was farther away from the larger home I lived near before, and fewer kids seemed to be in the area. One of the reasons was that it was an apartment complex for single guys and was far enough from my college that people who lived here had to drive to school. Still, I had a small bucket of candy prepared as usual, but I had been snacking from it. The apartments on both sides of me are usually quiet, and nobody lives in the apartment above mine. So far, the evening was just hours of silence and occasional music from my laptop. It was 7 o'clock, and still not a single person had stopped by for candy. I suddenly realized that I might have left my outside light off. I wasn't used to my apartment yet, so I opened the door and looked outside to check. It was off. No wonder nobody had stopped by. I flipped the switch on and looked back outside to see if people were there. I couldn't see anyone walking around, but it was dark, and the complex was large, so I didn't think much of it. I closed the door and started walking back towards the sofa. That was fast, I thought. I walked back to my sofa, stopped the music on my laptop, and picked up the bowl of candy. When I walked back to the open door, a young, dark-skinned boy, probably about 10 years old at most, stood there by himself with what looked like white flowers sprinkled all over the top of his head. He was wearing a SpongeBob shirt, and it didn't seem to be a costume nor dressed unusually, except for the white flowers on his short hair and forehead. He didn't say trick or treat, but he looked up at me and seemed irritated for some reason. "Can I use your bathroom?" His voice was monotone, almost like he was trying to fake a robot voice. I smiled, a bit shocked that my first visitor was this kid, and he didn't even want any candy. "Sure, but be quick." He ran inside past me and closed the bathroom door, locking it behind him. I decided to keep the front door open and stand next to it while I waited for him to finish, holding the bowl of candy while looking to see if anyone else was coming toward my apartment. 10 minutes later, and nobody came by, and the boy was still in my bathroom. "Are you okay?" There wasn't an answer, but I could hear him walking around behind the door. The water faucet turned on, just a tiny bit, streaming softly. I waited by the door. 2 minutes later, and the water was still running. My front door was open, and it was dark outside except for the glow from my porch light. Can you come out for a second?" I started to worry if the boy was all right or if he was playing some kind of prank. After all, it was Halloween. "I'm opening the door." I knew it was locked, but I tried wiggling the handle to see if it would budge. The water was running, but I couldn't hear anything else from behind the door. "Can you open the door? I need to use the bathroom," I said, using that as an excuse. I was starting to panic a little inside. Maybe he was hurt. There was still no answer. Now I was really starting to get worried. I ran my shoulder into the door once, wondering if what I saw people doing in crime dramas really works or not. It really hurt. I tried it again and again. Then I tried kicking the door. At this point, I was starting to freak out. The bathroom didn't have a key, so there was no way to open it. "I'm calling the police." Actually, I was worried if the police would even show up in a reasonable amount of time on Halloween. I called them anyway, and they said they were in the neighborhood and could be right over. While they drove over, I explained on the phone what was going on. When they arrived, I ran outside and unlocked the complex gate, then followed them back to my apartment. The 2 officers arrived. They heard the water running and then started kicking at the door. One of them had a crowbar but didn't need to use it. My cheap wooden bathroom door was open with a few solid kicks. It shot open, sending paint dust and wood chips everywhere. Then I saw both of the officers pull out their radios at the same time and enter the bathroom. I ran up behind them to see what happened, but the officers' figures were blocking the view. "Oh boy," I heard one of them say. Now I was freaking out, and I couldn't talk. I was already uncomfortable in my new apartment. I didn't want to have a memory of finding a dead boy in my bathroom. Both officers were shuffling around in the bathroom, Then they stepped out and put their radios away. They looked at me sternly, and then one of them sighed. "I'm not sure what to say," one officer began. "I'm going to let you off with a warning because it's Halloween." My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I couldn't even bring myself to make eye contact with them after seeing the expressions on their faces. "Expect a call from one of our officers tomorrow to discuss this further. For now, try not to contact us again tonight." With that, they walked out, leaving the door ajar. In a state of panic, I dashed into the bathroom. The floor was littered with tiny white wood chips from the door. The faucet was turned off, though I hadn't realized that the officers had done so. There was no sign of the boy or anything else amiss. The next morning, my phone rang, and a woman's voice greeted me. I braced myself, certain that I was in trouble. However, what she told me was utterly shocking. "I was going to call you about a prank phone call we received this morning," she began. "But after reviewing the police report, I'm not entirely surprised by what transpired." She identified herself as the apartment manager. "You may want to inquire with the police for more details, but simply put, when this complex used to house families, there was an incident 7 years ago. A boy tragically drowned in that very bathroom. I was left speechless. 7 years ago?" My mind whirled with thoughts and questions. And as it turns out, I wasn't the only one to have experienced such an event. The apartment manager informed me that a few years ago, the occupants of my apartment had called the police about hearing a boy locked in the bathroom. And yet, when the officers arrived, the bathroom was empty. It left me wondering if it was a ghostly encounter or something else entirely. The bathroom had been remodeled since then, but the mysteries of that night still haunted me. This whole situation really rattled me. Just yesterday, I noticed that my neighbor hadn't put up any Halloween decorations or lights for the past 2 years, which was strange because he used to go all out for Halloween. I didn't know him well. He was younger, single, but I knew he enjoyed interacting with kids in a non-creepy way. His brother and sister-in-law, along with their children, would often visit him, and he would play with his 3 young nieces and nephews in the yard. So when I got home from work, I saw him outside and decided to make a casual remark like, "Hey, you better start putting up your Halloween stuff, or that house up the street is going to outdo you with decorations." He gave me a somewhat sheepish smile and confided that this year he planned to keep his house dark and only give out candy. Naturally, I asked if he was going out of town, but he said no, and then dropped a bombshell. Something really frightening had happened last year that made him reconsider celebrating Halloween. Now I started feeling concerned about my own safety, wondering if something bizarre was happening in our usually safe neighborhood, filled with young families. So I asked him to explain what had occurred. He proceeded to tell me that last year, he had invited his brother's family over so they could enjoy trick-or-treating in the neighborhood, especially since they lived in an apartment complex that didn't do much for Halloween. Throughout the evening, a bunch of kids had come to his door, just like always. His brother's family left around 10:30, and by 11:30, the trick-or-treating in the neighborhood had pretty much wound down. So he was inside watching TV, when suddenly the doorbell rang. He grabbed the candy bowl and headed over, but it was already past midnight, and he thought it was rather impolite for trick-or-treaters to still be out at that hour. However, he realized he had forgotten to turn off all his decoration lights, so his house was still brightly lit. He swung the door open, about to make a playful remark to spook the latecomers, but he froze when he saw the kids standing there. According to him, one of them seemed to be around 13 or 14 years old, and the other appeared to be 16 or 17. Both were boys, and what struck him immediately was an overwhelming sense of unease, as if opening the door had been a terrible mistake. They just stared at him, and he noticed that their irises were unusually large, with dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes, so he assumed they were wearing contact lenses. He stood there paralyzed, holding the candy bowl, unable to slam the door in their faces as he wanted to. He attempted a nervous smile, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or something. However, the younger one simply stated that they had gotten lost, and needed to come inside to use his phone. That's when he started closing the door more than halfway and stammered out a hesitant, "No, sorry." The older one then asked if they could wait inside until their parents came to get them. At that point, his fear surged, convinced that his life was in danger and that the kids might be intoxicated or planning to rob him. He kept repeating, "No, sorry. Good night," as he slowly closed and locked the door. He told me that he was so terrified at that moment, thinking that they might try to break in through a window or something. He peered through the peephole, and he watched as they turned around slowly and left. He sat back down to watch TV, keeping the volume low so he could listen for any unusual sounds. He stayed up until around 5 a.m. because he was too frightened to go to bed and let his guard down. Throughout his story, I couldn't help but think that it sounded eerily similar to the urban legend of the Black-Eyed Kids. So, with a skeptical tone, I mentioned to him, "Man, that's really crazy. It sounds just like the Black-Eyed Kids." He stared at me blankly and asked, "The what? Is that from a movie or something?" I explained that it wasn't from a movie, but rather a well-known urban legend. I encouraged him to look it up online to see if it resonated with his experience. About an hour later, I heard a knock on my door. It startled me, making me jump a bit, as I wondered if it could be one of those mysterious kids. However, when I opened the door, it was my neighbor, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. He swore to me that he had never heard of the Black-Eyed Kids before, and he was genuinely shaken by how closely the legend matched what happened to him. We continued our conversation, and I reassured him that many people were aware of this urban legend, suggesting that perhaps it was just some mischievous teenagers playing a prank. But the unsettling part was that I had a photo, and as Halloween approached, my plan was to leave a bowl of candy in front of my door and keep my neighbor company. What made it even more chilling was the fact that the photo had a smiley face, but it wasn't an image of my door. It was a picture of my neighbor's. Either way, I couldn't allow him to face this alone. Hello, everyone! If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful or entertaining, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Your support motivates us to create more content you'll love. Thanks a million. And if you've just subscribed, please drop a comment saying I subscribed. We'd love to welcome you to our community.